The signal came on a cold winter night in the year 2047. A young scientist named Kevin Walsh sat alone in a small radio observatory in New Mexico. He was drinking his third cup of coffee when his computer started beeping. At first, he thought it was a mistake. Signals from space were usually just noise from distant stars. But this was different. This signal had a pattern. It repeated itself every 47 seconds, and it carried information that no natural object could produce. Kevin called his supervisor. His supervisor called the government. Within 6 hours, the President of the United States was reading a classified report about humanity's first contact with alien life. But there was no celebration. There were no news conferences. The world was not told, because what Kevin had found was not a friendly greeting. It was a military communication between two alien fleets, discussing the conquest of a planet called Verath 9. Over the next 4 years, Earth's greatest minds worked in secret to decode everything. They learned about the Galactic Council, a government that ruled over 400 star systems. They learned about the Vorathi Empire, a race of tall reptilian warriors who led the council with an iron fist. And they learned the most terrible truth of all. The galaxy was not a place of peace and exploration. It was a place of conquest and slavery. Young civilizations were given two choices when they were discovered. They could submit and serve the council, or they could be destroyed completely. The leaders of Earth met in secret bunkers to discuss what to do. Some wanted to send a message of peace. Others wanted to hide and hope they were never found. But one man had a different idea. His name was Daniel Carter, a young military officer who had been assigned to study the alien communications. He stood before the world's most powerful people and spoke words that would shape the next 300 years of human history. "They will find us eventually," Daniel said. "The galaxy is large, but it is not infinite. One day, a council ship will pass through our solar system, and they will see our cities, our satellites, and our radio signals. When that happens, they will come to claim us. And if we are not ready, our children and our grandchildren will spend their lives in chains." The room was silent. Everyone knew he was right. "So, what do you suggest?" the president asked. Daniel took a deep breath. "We stay silent. We hide every sign of advanced technology from the outside. We make them think we are primitives who have barely learned to use fire. And while they ignore us, we prepare. We build ships. We create weapons. We train soldiers. And when they finally come for us, expecting farmers with pitchforks, they will find an army waiting for them." It was a bold plan. It was a dangerous plan. But it was the only plan that gave humanity a chance. The world's governments agreed to work together in a way they never had before. Old enemies became allies. Resources were shared. Scientists from every nation joined a secret program to study the alien technology they intercepted in those radio signals. They could not build everything the aliens had, but they could understand it. And more importantly, they could find weaknesses. Kevin Walsh became the head of the technology division. He spent the next 40 years of his life in underground laboratories, working on weapons and shields and engines that the council had never imagined. He aged. His hair turned gray. His hands grew weak. But his mind stayed sharp, and his determination never faded. Daniel Carter rose through the military ranks until he became Admiral of Earth's United Defense Command. He built training programs that pushed soldiers to their limits. He created simulations based on alien battle tactics. He prepared humanity for a war that might not come for centuries. Above ground, life continued as normal. People went to work. Children went to school. Couples got married and had families. Most of them never knew about the secret world beneath their feet. They never knew about the massive shipyards carved into mountains. They never knew about the factories hidden under the ocean. They never knew that every satellite in orbit was actually a weapon waiting to be activated. The years passed. Daniel Carter grew old and died. Kevin Walsh followed him a decade later. But before they passed, they trained the next generation. And that generation trained the one after. The secret was passed down like a sacred flame, from parent to child, from teacher to student. By the year 2347, Earth had 300 warships hidden in underground hangars. They had weapons that could tear through alien shields like paper. They had soldiers who had trained their entire lives for a battle they hoped would never come. And they had waited long enough. President Scott Miller was the leader who would see the plan through. He was a calm man with gray eyes and a steady voice. He had known about the secret since he was a child. His father had been an engineer in the shipyards. His mother had been a codebreaker studying alien communications. He had grown up knowing that one day, everything would change. On the morning of March 15, 2347, Scott received the message he had been expecting his whole life. A Council scout ship had entered the solar system. It had passed Jupiter and was heading toward Earth. The aliens had finally noticed the small blue planet on the edge of the Orion Arm. Scott called a meeting of his top advisors. Admiral Nathan Pierce, the current head of the Defense Command, stood at attention. Dr. Amy Brooks, who had taken over the Technology Division, held a tablet full of battle plans. Captain Megan Torres, one of the youngest and most brilliant tactical officers in the fleet, waited silently in the corner. "This is the moment our ancestors prepared for," Scott said quietly. 300 years of silence. 300 years of sacrifice. 300 years of waiting. He looked at each of them in turn. "The Council thinks they are coming to claim a primitive world. They think we will bow down and beg for mercy. They are wrong." He pressed a button on his desk, and a holographic image of Earth appeared in the center of the room. Beneath the surface, hidden from alien sensors, 300 ships glowed like sleeping dragons. "Let them come," Scott said. "Let them make their demands. Let them feel confident and superior. And when they least expect it, we will show them what humanity is truly capable of." The long silence was about to end, and when Earth finally spoke, the galaxy would tremble. The Vorathi scout ship was called the Dominance, and it carried Ambassador Drethkon, one of the most feared diplomats in the galaxy. He had visited over 60 worlds during his career. Some had surrendered peacefully, others had tried to fight. All of them now served the Council. Drethkon had never failed, and he did not expect to fail on this small blue planet either. As his ship entered orbit around Earth, Drethkon studied the data his sensors had collected. The planet had a population of 12 billion. They had primitive vehicles that burned fossil fuels. Their communication systems used simple radio waves. Their weapons appeared to be basic projectile devices and crude explosives. By Council standards, they were barely more advanced than animals. Drethkon smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. This would be an easy harvest. The Council had designated Earth as a labor world. Its people would be divided among the factories and mines of a dozen different systems. The strongest would work. The weakest would be used for genetic experiments. It was the natural order of things. The strong ruled, the weak served. The ambassador sent a message to the surface, demanding that Earth's leaders meet him in their largest city. He chose New York because it had the tallest buildings. He wanted the humans to see his ship descending from the clouds. He wanted them to feel small and helpless. On the ground, President Scott Miller watched the alien vessel approach on a monitor in his underground bunker. Admiral Nathan Pierce stood beside him, his hands clasped behind his back. Dr. Amy Brooks was running final checks on their hidden defense systems. Captain Megan Torres was in the command center of the flagship Constellation, waiting for orders that might not come for days. "Remember," Scott said to his team, "we need them to believe we are weak. We need them to report back to the Council that Earth is no threat. The longer they underestimate us, the better our advantage." The plan was simple but dangerous. They would send actors to meet the ambassador. These men and women had been trained for years to play the role of frightened world leaders. They would stutter and shake. They would argue among themselves. They would beg for mercy and ask for more time. And while they performed their act, the real military would stay hidden, watching and waiting. Nathan nodded grimly. "Our people know what to do. They understand the stakes." The alien ship landed in Central Park, crushing trees and sending waves of dirt and grass into the air. A ramp extended from its belly, and Ambassador Drethkon walked down with 20 armed soldiers behind him. He stood 9 feet tall, with dark green scales and yellow eyes that seemed to glow in the afternoon sun. His armor was black and covered with symbols that represented his many conquests. The human delegation approached slowly, exactly as they had rehearsed. The lead actor, a man named Peter Gray, played the role of Earth's president. He was sweating heavily, and his voice cracked when he spoke. "Welcome to Earth," he said. "We are honored by your visit." Drethkon did not bother with pleasantries. "I am Ambassador Drethkon of the Galactic Council. Your world has been claimed. You have 30 rotations to prepare your population for transition. Those who cooperate will be treated fairly. Those who resist will be destroyed." Peter stumbled backward, his face filled with what looked like genuine terror. 30 days. But we need more time. Our people will panic. There will be chaos. Your problems do not concern me, Drethkon replied coldly. The council has spoken. You will obey. Watching from a hidden camera, Admiral Nathan Pierce felt his blood boil. Every instinct told him to give the order. To activate the orbital defense grid and blast the alien ship out of existence, but he knew that would be a mistake. 52 Vorathi warships waited in orbit around the moon. If Earth attacked now, those ships would rain fire on every major city. Millions would die in the first hour. No. They had to wait. They had to let the aliens feel confident. They had to let more Vorathi transports land. And then, when the enemy was spread thin and unprepared, they would strike. The days that followed were the hardest of Nathan's life. He watched as Vorathi soldiers walked through human cities like they owned them. He watched as they set up collection points where humans were supposed to gather for processing. He watched as people cried and prayed and held their families close, not knowing that an army waited beneath their feet. Amy Brooks used the time wisely. Her teams secretly scanned every piece of Vorathi technology they could find. They analyzed their weapons, their armor, their communication devices. They found weaknesses that the aliens did not know existed. Their shields were designed to stop energy weapons but struggled against physical projectiles. Their sensors could not detect objects moving below a certain speed. Their soldiers relied heavily on commands from their officers and became confused when leadership was disrupted. "We can beat them," Amy reported to the president on the 25th day. "Our weapons will work. Our tactics will work. We just need the right moment." Captain Megan Torres spent those days running simulations in the command center of the constellation. She was only 32 years old, but she had been training for this her entire life. Her parents had served in the Defense Command. Her grandparents had helped build the first hidden shipyards. This war was her inheritance, and she intended to win it. On the morning of the 29th day, Ambassador Drethkon sent a message to Earth's fake leaders. The transports were coming. The harvest would begin at noon. Humans were expected to report to collection points peacefully. Any resistance would be met with immediate execution. President Scott Miller received the message in his bunker. He looked at Nathan, then at Amy, then at the hundreds of officers who had gathered to witness this moment. 300 years, Scott said quietly. 12 generations of preparation. Countless sacrifices made by people who knew they would never see this day. He stood up straight and took a deep breath. "Admiral Pierce, you may give the order." Nathan walked to the main communication console. His hands were steady. His voice was clear. He pressed the button that would broadcast to every ship, every soldier, and every weapon system on the planet. "All units, this is Admiral Pierce. Execute Protocol Awakening. I repeat, execute Protocol Awakening. God speed to you all." Deep beneath the Earth, 300 ships powered their engines. Across 6 continents, hidden hangar doors began to open. In orbit, satellites that had pretended to be simple communication devices armed their weapons and locked onto Vorathi targets. The silence was over. The war had begun. The first Vorathi transport was 300 feet above New York City when the sky turned white. A beam of light shot up from what had appeared to be an ordinary office building and cut through the alien vessel like a knife through bread. The transport split in half and fell, crashing into the Hudson River in a massive explosion of water and fire. Ambassador Drethkon watched in disbelief from his command ship. Before he could give a single order, 17 more beams erupted from buildings across the city. His escort ships, the fighters that were supposed to protect him, vanished in balls of flame. Alarms screamed throughout his vessel as damage reports flooded in from every system. "What is happening?" he roared at his officers. "These primitives have no weapons." But they did have weapons. They had weapons that the Vorathi had never imagined. 3 centuries of secret development had produced technology that broke every rule the Council thought they understood. In orbit above the moon, the 52 Vorathi warships scrambled to respond to the sudden attack. Their commanders shouted orders, trying to organize a counterattack. They never got the chance. Earth's defense satellites, which had been floating silently in space for decades, opened fire simultaneously. The satellites used kinetic weapons, simple metal rods accelerated to incredible speeds. Vorathi shields were designed to absorb energy. They had no answer for chunks of tungsten moving at 40,000 miles per hour. Captain Megan Torres watched the battle unfold from the bridge of the Constellation. Her ship rose from its underground hangar in the mountains of Colorado, joining dozens of others that emerged from hiding places around the world. The sight was breathtaking. Warships lifted off from deserts and forests and frozen wastelands. They rose from platforms hidden beneath the ocean. They burst through fake hillsides and camouflaged bunkers. "All ships, form, attack pattern Delta," Megan ordered. Her voice was calm even though her heart was racing. "Focus fire on their command vessels. Take out their leadership first." The Vorathi fleet tried to regroup, but they were already dying. Ship after ship exploded as human weapons tore through their defenses. The aliens had expected to face farmers with pitchforks. Instead, they faced an army that had studied them for 300 years, learned every weakness, and built weapons specifically designed to exploit those weaknesses. On the ground, the battle was equally one-sided. Admiral Nathan Pierce led the assault on the Vorathi soldiers who had landed in major cities around the world. Human troops emerged from subway tunnels and basement shelters, wearing armor that made them stronger and faster than any normal person. They carried rifles that fired rounds capable of punching through Vorathi shields with ease. The aliens fought back, but they were confused and disorganized. Their communication systems were being jammed by satellites they had dismissed as primitive technology. Their officers were being targeted by snipers who could hit a moving target from 2 miles away. Their formations crumbled as soldiers lost contact with their commanders and began to panic. Private Lisa Morgan was one of the first soldiers to engage the enemy in Chicago. She was 24 years old, the daughter of a factory worker and a teacher. Neither of her parents knew that she had spent the last 6 years training for this exact moment. As she ran through the streets, firing at green-scaled warriors twice her size, she felt no fear. Only purpose. Only the knowledge that everything her ancestors had built was finally being put to use. "Push them back," her sergeant shouted. "Don't let them reach the civilians." Lisa obeyed without hesitation. She watched a Vorathi soldier fall as her rounds cracked his armor. She watched another turn and run, abandoning his weapon in terror. The mighty warriors of the Galactic Council, the conquerors of 400 worlds, were fleeing from humans. Ambassador Drethkon managed to escape the destruction of his fleet by hiding in the lower atmosphere, using Earth's own weather systems to mask his ship's signature. He tried to send a distress signal to the Council, to warn them about what had happened, but human jamming technology blocked every frequency he attempted. As his ship limped toward the ocean, hoping to find somewhere to hide, a shadow passed over him. He looked up and saw the constellation descending from the clouds. It was massive, larger than any ship the Council had ever built. Its hull was covered with weapons that glowed with barely contained power. "Ambassador Drethkon," a voice said over his communication system. It was a human voice, calm and cold. "This is Captain Megan Torres of the Earth Defense Fleet. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. If you resist, you will be destroyed." Drethkon's hands trembled as he reached for the controls. He had never surrendered in his life. He had never even considered the possibility. But as he looked at the warship floating above him, As he thought about the fleet that had been annihilated in less than an hour, he realized that he had no choice. "I surrender," he said, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. Within 6 hours, the battle was over. Every Vorathi ship in the solar system had been destroyed or captured. Every alien soldier on Earth had been killed or taken prisoner. Humanity had won its first engagement with the Galactic Council, and they had won it completely. President Scott Miller addressed the world that evening. For the first time in 300 years, the secret was revealed. People learned about the hidden fleets, the underground bases, the generations of preparation. They learned that their governments had known about alien life for centuries and had been preparing to defend them. The reaction was not anger, as some had feared. It was pride. It was unity. It was a fierce determination to see this fight through to the end. "Today, we have won a battle," Scott said, his face broadcast on every screen on the planet. "But the war is just beginning. The Council will send more ships. They will send larger fleets. They will try to crush us with numbers and firepower. And we will be ready for them." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "For 300 years, we stayed silent. We watched. We learned. We prepared. Now, it is time for the galaxy to learn something about us. Humanity does not surrender. Humanity does not kneel. And humanity never, ever gives up." Deep in the captured Vorathi command ship, Dr. Amy Brooks worked through the night, downloading navigation charts and military data. She found coordinates for council bases, trade routes, and slave worlds. She found information about their allies and their enemies. She found everything humanity needed to take the war beyond Earth. The trap had been sprung. Now it was time to hunt. The Galactic Council received word of the disaster through a single distress beacon that had somehow escaped the jamming field. High Counselor Vetharn, supreme leader of the Vorathi Empire, read the report in his throne room and laughed. A primitive species destroying 52 warships? Impossible. The beacon must have been corrupted. Ambassador Drethkon had probably encountered some minor technical difficulty and exaggerated his situation. He sent a proper battle group to investigate. 30 warships under the command of Fleet Admiral Krathval, a veteran of 100 campaigns. Surely that would be enough to handle whatever small problem had occurred on that insignificant blue planet. The battle group arrived in Earth's solar system 2 months later. They found nothing. No human ships. No orbital defenses. No signs of the battle that had supposedly taken place. Krathval was confused. His sensors showed a peaceful planet with primitive technology. Had the whole thing been a mistake? Then his communication officer reported something strange. They were receiving a signal from the planet Jupiter. It was a human broadcast, playing on repeat. "Welcome to the Sol system," the recording said. "You are looking for us in the wrong place. While you were traveling here, we were visiting your homes. Please enjoy the attached footage. Also, welcome to the Sol system. Please enjoy the attached footage." The footage showed human warships attacking Vorathi supply stations. It showed human soldiers liberating slave camps on distant moons. It showed the Vorathi military flag being torn down and replaced with a blue banner bearing the image of Earth. Krathval watched in horror as he realized the truth. The humans had not been waiting to be conquered. They had taken the navigation data from the captured ships and used it to launch attacks across Council space. While his fleet had been traveling to Earth, humanity had been burning the Empire. The Council called an emergency session for the first time in 600 years. Representatives from every member species gathered in the Grand Chamber to discuss the impossible situation. A species they had never heard of was tearing through their territory like a storm. "How is this happening?" demanded Ambassador Krell of the Sindari Union. "These humans were supposed to be primitives. Our scouts reported they had barely achieved spaceflight." High Counselor Vetharn had no answer. He had underestimated the humans. He had assumed, like everyone else, that a species who stayed silent must be weak. He had been wrong. Far across the galaxy, Admiral Nathan Pierce stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Northern Star, watching his fleet emerge from hyperspace above a world called Kareth 7. This planet had been conquered by the Vorathi 800 years ago. Its native population, a gentle species of four-armed beings with blue skin, had been enslaved for generations. They worked in mines and factories, producing materials for the Council's war machine. All ships, begin landing operations, Nathan ordered. Ground teams, secure the slave compounds first. Medical units, prepare for survivors. Captain Megan Torres led the assault. Her troops landed in waves, overwhelming the small Vorathi garrison before they could organize a defense. She moved through the streets of the main settlement, her soldiers spreading out to secure key positions. The Karathi slaves watched from behind fences and through barred windows. They had seen alien ships before, but these were different. These ships were not here to hurt them. When the fighting stopped, and the Vorathi guards were defeated, human soldiers began cutting through the fences. A young Karathi named Solith was among the first to be freed. She had been born in the camps, like her mother and grandmother before her. She had never known any life except slavery. When a human soldier removed her chains, she did not know how to react. "You are free," the soldier said through a translation device. "No one will hurt you anymore." Solith looked at the soldier's face. It was soft and round, nothing like the hard scales of the Vorathi. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help us?" "Why?" The soldier, a young man named Private Danny Cole, smiled gently. "Because no one deserves to live in chains. Because we know what the Council does to species they consider weak, and because someday we might need friends in this galaxy." Word of the liberation spread quickly. Other enslaved species heard that a new power had risen, one that fought not for conquest but for freedom. Hope sparked in hearts that had forgotten what hope felt like. On dozens of worlds, slaves began to whisper a new word: humanity. The Council responded with force. They assembled the largest fleet in galactic history, over 2,000 warships from every member species. Ancient enemies put aside their differences to face this common threat. The Vorathi, the Sindari, the Krell, the Morath, and a dozen other races combined their military might. Admiral Nathan Pierce received intelligence reports about the fleet's formation. He called a meeting with his top officers aboard the Northern Star. "They are coming for us," he told them. 2,000 ships. Maybe more. The largest force ever assembled in this galaxy's history. Captain Torres studied the numbers on her tablet. "Our current fleet strength is 312 ships. Even with our technological advantages, those odds are difficult." "Yes," Nathan agreed. "If we fight alone." He pressed a button, and the holographic display changed. It showed not just human ships, but vessels from a dozen different species, Karathi cruisers, Sindari frigates that had defected from the Council, ships from worlds that had been liberated and had chosen to join humanity's cause. "We are not alone," Nathan said. "Every world we free adds to our strength. Every slave we rescue becomes a potential ally." The Council built their empire on fear and domination. We are building something different. We are building an alliance based on hope. Over the next 6 months, humanity's fleet grew. Liberated species contributed ships, soldiers, and most importantly, knowledge. They shared secrets about Council weaknesses, hidden bases, and internal conflicts. The Sindari revealed that many of their people hated the Vorathi and would switch sides if given the chance. The Morath explained that the Council's communication network had a critical flaw that could be exploited. Dr. Amy Brooks worked with scientists from 12 different species to develop new weapons and strategies. They created a virus that could disable Council defense systems. They designed shields that could withstand even the most powerful Vorathi weapons. They built engines that could outrun anything the enemy possessed. When the final battle came, humanity would not be facing 2,000 ships with 300. They would be facing 2,000 ships with 3,000. The oppressed had become an army. The slaves had become warriors, and together, they were coming for the heart of the empire. High Counselor Vetharn received reports of the approaching fleet and felt something he had never experienced before: fear. The humans were not supposed to be a threat. They were supposed to be prey. Instead, they had become the hunters. and they were coming for him. The Nexus system was the heart of the Galactic Council. 5 planets orbited a brilliant white star, and on the largest of these planets stood the capital city of the Empire. Towers of black metal reached toward the sky. Streets of polished stone stretched for hundreds of miles. At the center of it all was the Grand Chamber, where the Council had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. High Counselor Vetharn stood on the balcony of his palace, watching his fleet take up defensive positions. 2,000 warships formed a wall of metal and fire around his world. Orbital defense platforms hummed with deadly energy. Ground batteries stood ready to destroy anything that made it through. He had gathered every weapon, every soldier, and every resource the Empire possessed. "Let them come," he whispered to himself. "Let these humans see what true power looks like." The first human ships emerged from hyperspace at exactly noon. Admiral Nathan Pierce stood on the bridge of the Northern Star, his hands clasped behind his back. Beside him, Captain Megan Torres monitored tactical displays that showed the enemy fleet in perfect detail. "There's a lot of them," she observed calmly. "Yes," Nathan agreed. "But look closer." More ships were appearing from hyperspace. Human vessels came first, 300 strong. Then came the Kirathi fleet. 200 warships crewed by former slaves who had learned to fight for their freedom. Then the Sindari defectors. 100 frigates that had switched sides rather than serve the Council any longer. Then ships from a dozen other species, the Morath, the Vel, the Tanakh, and many more. When the last vessel had arrived, the Allied fleet numbered over 3,000 ships. The oppressed of the galaxy had united under one banner, and they had come to end the Council's reign. High Counselor Vetharn watched the fleet appear on his tactical display, and for the first time in his long life, he understood that he might lose. But he was Varathi. He had been raised to fight. He would not surrender without bleeding his enemies dry. "All ships, attack formation," he commanded. "Destroy them all." The two fleets collided like waves crashing against each other. Energy beams and kinetic rounds filled the void between them. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Debris scattered in all directions. The battle was chaos, beautiful, and terrible at the same time. Captain Megan Torres led the assault on the Council's command ships. Her squadron weaved through enemy fire with precision that the Varathi could not match. Human pilots had trained for this their entire lives. They knew every enemy tactic, every weakness, every pattern. They moved like dancers, performing a routine they had practiced 10,000 times. "Target their communication arrays," Megan ordered. "Cut off their coordination." Her ships obeyed instantly. Missiles streaked toward the Varathi command vessels, detonating against their communication dishes and sensor arrays. Without clear orders, the Council fleet began to fracture. Ships that had been working together moments ago now operated independently, getting in each other's way. On the ground, Admiral Nathan Pierce led the invasion force. Dropships screamed through the atmosphere, carrying soldiers from a dozen different species. Human Marines fought alongside Kirathi warriors and Sindari engineers. They had trained together, bled together, and now they would win together. The Council's ground forces fought desperately, but they were facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. Dr. Amy Brooks had delivered on her promise. The virus she had created spread through the capital's defense network, shutting down automated turrets and disabling security barriers. Doors that were supposed to be locked swung open. Shields that were supposed to be impenetrable flickered and died. Private Danny Cole was among the first soldiers to reach the Grand Chamber. He kicked down the ancient doors and found himself standing in a room that had witnessed 10,000 years of history. The curved walls were covered with symbols representing conquered worlds. The floor was polished black stone, and at the far end of the room, on a throne made of metal and bone, sat High Counselor Vetharn. "Hold your fire," Nathan ordered, stepping into the chamber. He walked slowly toward the throne, his weapon lowered but ready. "It's over, Counselor. Your fleet is breaking. Your soldiers are surrendering. The Council is finished." Vetharn rose from his throne. He was old now. His scales faded and cracked, but his eyes still burned with hatred. "You think you have won?" he hissed. You are insects. You are nothing. We ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. You have ruled it for months. How long do you think your little alliance will last? Nathan stopped a few feet from the throne. Maybe it won't last. Maybe the species we've united will eventually go their separate ways. That's their choice. But we didn't fight this war to build an empire. We fought it to tear yours down. Why? Vetharn demanded. You could have stayed hidden. You could have lived in peace on your little world. Why did you choose to fight? Nathan thought about the question. He thought about Admiral Daniel Carter, who had started this plan 300 years ago. He thought about Kevin Walsh, who had spent his life building weapons he hoped would never be used. He thought about all the generations who had sacrificed and prepared and waited. Because you made a mistake, Nathan said finally. You found a planet that stayed silent, and you assumed that silence meant weakness. You thought we were afraid. You thought we had nothing to say. He stepped closer, looking directly into the counselor's yellow eyes. We had everything to say. We were just waiting for you to stop talking long enough to hear it. Vetharn had no response. For the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. The war ended that day. The council was dissolved. The empire that had ruled through fear and violence crumbled into dust. In its place, a new galactic assembly formed, not a government of conquerors, but a union of equals. Admiral Megan Torres, promoted after the battle, commanded the peacekeeping fleet that protected the new order. She had been a young tactical officer running simulations just 2 years ago. Now she was a symbol of hope for hundreds of species. President Scott Miller addressed the first meeting of the Galactic Assembly. Representatives from across the galaxy listened as he spoke. We did not seek power, he said. We did not want empire. We only wanted to be free. And we wanted freedom for others. Today, we begin building something new. A galaxy where every species has a voice. A galaxy where no one is enslaved. A galaxy where the strong protect the weak instead of preying upon them. He paused, looking out at the assembled delegates. Earth stayed silent for 300 years. We learned. We grew. We prepared. And when we finally spoke, we spoke for everyone who had been silenced by the Council's tyranny. Today, the silence is over. Today, the galaxy listens. And tomorrow, together, we will build something better. The chamber erupted in applause. Humans and aliens stood side by side, united by a shared vision of the future. It would not be easy. There would be challenges and conflicts and setbacks. But for the first time, in 10,000 years, the galaxy had hope, and it had started with one small planet that refused to be afraid.